Hello, I'm Robert Moore, and welcome, or welcome back as the case may be. I'm going to spend this video, as short or as long as it may become, discussing a question that was given to me by an old friend of mine. She is an author too, but she came at it from the creative side. She was an English major when we met, and she has been a writer for most of the time that we've known each other. So she asked me the question, how has your background as a scientist led you to writing? And the most obvious answer to that is, quite honestly, that in science you have to write. It's not the writing of stories or something, although my advisor for my PhD program would probably strangle me and is probably laughing right now if he's watching this, for saying, because my PhD program was in geological sciences, planetary science. And unlike physics and astronomy, where you tend to be an impartial observer, you are observing things after you've set up an experiment or a set of observations to test something you're hypothesizing about. So in those two sciences, you tend to be more of an impartial observer. This leads to actually writing a lot of passive voice and a lot of non-story elements. You're just reporting what went on, what happened. In geology, though, every rock, every mineral, every experiment and test has a story to tell. Now, you have to know some of the science. In fact, you have to know a lot of the science to tell that story. So you have to know all the chemistry and things like that. But in the end, you are writing a story. I did this experiment under these conditions, and this is what I got out of it. This is how I interpret those results. And it caused me a little bit of trouble switching gears. So that's that. Now, I shouldn't have that long pause in there, but I'll get eventually to where I'll remove those. So what I'm trying to say and get at is science is as much about writing as anything else. If, I'll quote the Mythbusters there, are here. The difference between science and fooling around is writing it down. They're not entirely wrong when Adam Savage made that quote, or made that statement, I should say, because, he wasn't quoting at the time. So, yeah, even in science, you've got to be able to write things down, and you have to be able to write things down in a clear, understandable fashion. Now, a lot of people who aren't used to the sciences look at science papers and go, that's clear and understandable? Well, it is if you have the background in a lot of cases. I often tell students that science and math are like a brick wall. You can't just suddenly jump up here to this top brick or this middle brick. You've got to have all the bricks underneath it. So while good science should be able to a degree to be expressed in language anybody can understand, there are limits to that. There is a certain amount of background knowledge that you really need to have. So that's how it's prepared me, though, is you have to boil this down, you have to distill it, you have to work with it until somebody who wasn't in the lab with you is able to understand what you did and follow your thinking process for why you say these experiments lead you to the conclusions you draw. So that's how science has prepared me for writing. Not so much on the creativity of the language. You can't get all flowery and expressive. But, I have written a thesis. I have written a paper. It wasn't accepted, unfortunately, but I have written a paper. And that paper was 23 pages of, this is what I did. This is why I did it. This is what we were looking for. And it all had to make sense. It all had to follow a structure. It all had to be intelligible. So, as weird as it may sound, yes, science prepared me for writing. It prepared me for being clear, concise, and quick, which has been a problem. Sometimes you can be too concise and quick. Never doubt it. you know, Sometimes my descriptions have been a little sparse, and my editor has said, no, you need to elaborate more here. So, if you're a scientist and you think you've got good stories to tell, I encourage you to do so. If you are a writer, I encourage you to learn some about the sciences because I've been approached by several of my writing friends that I've made in the recent past. How would you deal with this? How would a scientist handle this? Because science does play a role in some of the stories we want to tell. So don't neglect, if you're trying to be an English major or you're trying to be a writer, don't neglect learning the science and the math because you never know what story you're going to want to tell. And sometimes knowing these little details is beyond helpful. Anyway, I'm going to call it a halt here. Fairly short video, but I can't think of too much more to say. But if you have questions on any of this, if you would like to hear me expound more or explain something I've said, please feel free to drop a comment. I'm willing to discuss most anything, especially about science. Why aren't you writing about science? I am. I still am. I'm just also telling stories. So anyway, I hope you're having a good day when you see this, and I hope you continue to have a good day. But for now, so long, and I hope you'll join me with the next of these that I post. Thank you. Bye.